For those who are totally unfamiliar with the genus, can we run through just some of the basics that, as a bird's eye view of this genus?
So there are about 20 recognized species. You can find them in North and Central America. The range is from the edge of Canada over the southwest down to Mexico, Baja California, and then population on the tip of Guatemala. They are in a variety of different habitats, mostly around ants, where ant populations are. They occupy areas with loose or sandy soils, but sometimes also dry riverbed, lush forests. We have shrublands, grasslands, also volcanic areas. So they are adapted to our environment pretty much in every way. But all of the species prefer to have a similar body shape. So evolution catched pretty early on them, and they developed as surrounding ants in the environment.
Mm. And how large are they? Because they're fairly small, if I'm knowing correctly.
Oh, there are big ones.
Oh, they are big. Oh, there are big ones. Okay.
There are big ones. The Phrynosoma asio is the Mexican great horned lizard. They get from head to vent 12 centimeters.
Mm.
The other,
Wow.
between that, we have also varieties of different sizes. So between 3 centimeters head to vent to about 12 centimeters, we have everything between them.
Gotcha. And their actual sort of body plan does look somewhat similar, I guess, across all species. Like you said, evolution
Yeah.
kind of kicked in pretty early with them, but there's a size difference, and I'm sure some color, some variations
Mhm.
like that.
Yeah. Typically, the color variation is determined by the surroundings they have. They are pretty good at camouflage. They are adapted at all sorts of environments. Their back is also made like sandpaper. So after a shed, they cover themselves with the substrate and blend in more
Mm.
into the environment. They also have a row, or some species have two rows of fringe scales around the sides, so they eliminate every shadow. If they press themselves down to the substrate, you can't see them.
That's amazing. And
That's
that's
so
what
awesome.
people will see either if they're watching this on Spotify or YouTube,
Mm,
or going to your Instagram page
mm,
after. The most eye-catching thing about your page is how beautiful you've recreated those environments. So I really want to talk about that as well. But
mm.
that's one of the fascinating things about keeping a species like this, is getting to replicate some of that in captivity. Uh, how many species have you, or do you work with, or have you worked with over the years?
I'm on the eight now.
Okay.
I've right now at the moment I have only two species I work with because of limited space. But over the years, I have kept and bred seven, and now I'm with the Texas horned lizard, and I'm in the eight.
And are they fairly, as you said, they have quite a large geographic range,
Mhm.
and I'm sure that's species specific. So do you actually cater their care differently based off the species, or are you kind of following a similar template across all species?
Depending on the density of population, I know where they were imported because of the regulations in the USA. So adjacent areas are more or less the same, but I go after a baseline. I go into the specific care of every animal. Mexican species, you can keep them much more like a frog or a bearded dragon. They are more tropical. Desert species need a little bit more arid, loose soil, a little bit lower in humidity and average humidity, but also with sorts of microclimates. And depending on the species, I incorporate different sorts of structures and brushes. For example, Texas horned lizard has a dedicated stripe on its back, which helps simulate a dried grass. And then I just put in dry grass so they can camouflage a little bit more.
Yeah, yeah. Let's talk a little bit about just doing research for this, because
Mhm.
this is something that you're quite good at, is doing research on a species that doesn't have a ton of information. And like, where do you start? How do you do it properly? How do you make sure that you're acquiring the right information?
I think it's important to also research the environment. So I start with research, and it doesn't matter for me if I had a species of horned lizard or I'm getting a new one. I always start over with my research so I can catch up. I usually go over the density of population. Where's the highest density? Because that tells me, okay, there's most likely the most suitable conditions. And then I start with researching the environment first. I look at environmental studies. I look at geographical studies, agriculture. I look at plants. Then I look at the soil and the composition of that. I look at predators and also what kind of ants or other invertebrates are there. And then at the last point, then I research the animal itself.
So you start with this sort of foundation of the earth that it's being surrounded by, whether that's predators, prey, and climate.
Absolutely, because that's what evolution does. We have the environment with most likely all its predators and the food source, and the animal has to adapt to it. So for me, it is a logical conclusion to look in the environment first, and then seek out what's the animal's needs.
Something like population density, are you just getting that from academic papers written on the genus? Okay.
Yeah. I read about 50 to 100 papers in a couple of months, so I'm pretty picky on information. I do my own research. Also look at all different kinds of topics. It's not just about an environment. I look at botanical studies, geographical studies. It's you can compare a study made from a geologist with a study made on the environment by a biologist. There's two different kinds of people with two different mindsets. The one looks after the animal first, the other looks after the stones and the gravel and the substrate. It's much more like you have different light sources which are good in one thing and you combine them. That's basically what I do.
Yeah, that's a great point. And the thing is when you're at the end of the day, you're doing research for husbandry for an animal, but you almost have to completely get rid of once you've identified the area, you have to delete the animal from your brain almost. And that, because that really hampers what you're going to use as resources if you're trying to attach those resources to that specific animal. Yeah,
exactly. I want to recreate the environment without the factors of a predator or without the factors of, without the bad factors, let's say so. And then I put the animal in. It's also like a habit I picked up from fish keeping. I first set up the environment, looked at everything is right, and then I introduced the animal.
And as I said, it's so clear that you do that because the enclosures are set up so well and that the animals look like, it does really look like a piece of nature. So why don't we discuss just a little bit of the husbandry, and we'll save the ants for later because I think that's quite a speed bump to cover. But let's just discuss the basics of enclosure size and lighting and whatnot.